addiction, prevention, recovery.
Welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Recovery Rebirth Podcast. I'm Dominic.
And I'm Jillian. Hello, listeners.
Welcome to the show today. Appreciate you all tuning in. Today we're going to talk about a topic in recovery that comes up quite often, at least in 12-step recovery. And I don't know if the terms are used. They're certainly used in psychology. Restless, irritable, and discontent. And I like to call those the red flags in recovery. Jillian, what do you think?
Well, I know a lot about red flags, specifically about ignoring them, so I'm intrigued by this topic.
So restless, irritable, and discontent is usually, in counseling, it's referred to as like the danger time toward a relapse. And for those in recovery, nobody really wants to relapse. So what we have to learn, I guess, is how to recognize the red flags. And the three that they fall under is restless, irritable, and discontentness. Some people will say that, when you're not working a program, you get restless, irritable, and discontent. Have you found that to be true in your program, Jillian?
Yeah, and it's a little bit different, although I feel like there's a lot of overlap between recovering from a substance, like alcohol or substance, and codependent recovery. So I don't know that I hear that terminology used as much in, my recovery program. But I can definitely relate to the red flags in recovery when I'm getting off my path. So, yeah, I definitely have been irritable when I'm mostly resentful. So resentful is a big one for me when I was too focused on the alcoholics, recovery, lack of recovery. Yeah, that was, yeah.
Well, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they have a book. It's called The Big Book. If those listeners who are not familiar with AA, The Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous has addressed this topic in multiple places, but they say restless, irritable, and discontentness, unless they can experience the sense of ease and comfort that comes by taking a few drinks, which means disaster for the alcoholic.
Yeah.
If you're restless, you're irritable, you're discontent about life, pressures are getting down on you, the relapse is already happening mentally, and it's time to see the red flag and dig in where you need to dig in your program. Now, if you're in early recovery from substance use, I found that everybody has mood swings. So being a little restless, irritable, and discontent is not unusual in early recovery. As a matter of fact, it kind of cracks me up. People get diagnosed bipolar and they're 2 weeks sober.
Right.
I mean, everybody's bipolar 2 weeks sober.
Right.
Or
who wouldn't have a mood swing?
Something.
Yes.
Yeah, you just took away my medication and now I'm stark raving sober.
Oh, stark raving sober. That's a great way to describe it.
So, yeah, of course people are going to have mood swings. But, I mean, if you're, 6 months in, you're a year in or whatever, and you start to spot a red flag, like you find you're irritable more than you should be, or you're resentful, or you're getting angry. Anger is a big part of it, I found.
Yes.
So, anger comes out more often and lasts longer, and that should be a red flag. Why am I so bloody angry? Why am I irritable at the slightest thing? All of a sudden I'm yelling at people in traffic and giving people the finger and cutting people off and all that kind of stuff. Being short and impatient with people. So I have to spot those red flags. And discontentment can hit at the weirdest times, Jillian. It hits me sometimes when things are going good.
Yeah.
It's like, you're used to going along at 90 miles an hour in the rat race. Everybody knows how life can be really, really hectic.
Yep.
Painfully hectic. And you might not be discontent at all, but then you go and relax and everything's done and the goals are accomplished and you're trying to take a break and the discontentment hits. Well, one of the things that I found in doing a little study on restlessness, irritability, and discontentment, they're actually associated with depression and anxiety, which may be co-occurring conditions to addiction. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I want to ask you a couple of questions, Jillian. I know you always bring great perspective to the table. So I'm going to ask you two different views so that our listeners will get two different views from it. The first view is you have mentioned in previous podcasts, we've talked about this, that you've been in relationships with alcoholics.
One for sure.
One for sure.
Very long term, yes.
And what is, from your perspective, living with an alcoholic, watching from the outside, looking in, do you see the red flags? Do you see restless, irritable, and discontentment in the other person? Did you spot that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And for him, one of his biggest things is he would go into workaholism mode. And then that was usually like the precursor for like a binge or, heavier drinking. I remember one time us driving along. God, he was a very sweet, compassionate, kind person oftentimes. But, alcohol could just like transform him into, mutate him into somebody I didn't recognize sometimes. But a lot of anger. It's a very angry disease. So is codependency, by the way. I remember talking to him, he was yelling. We were in the car, and I called him out for being angry, and he literally pounded his fist on my dashboard. He's like, "I'm not angry." And I was like, I wish I had a video of this so I could show you this when you're sober, because that's going to make a difference. But I could definitely see it in him, but more, anyhow, you had another question. So yes, I could.
So you're able to spot the red flags in an alcoholic and realize that they're getting restless, irritable, and discontent.
Yes.
I mean, before like the fist pounding and all that, did you see the subtle signs?
I think the subtlety, more like when I noticed him, I don't know if that was subtle, but like starting to take on work a lot and go to that workaholic mode. Unfortunately, because of who I am, I don't tend to see red flags. I'm getting better at it, but like back then I didn't see it as much because of my darn rose-colored glasses. So it usually took things getting really bad for me to be like, wow, we're in crisis mode now.
Right.
Yeah.
So the next perspective I was going to ask you about, so we get a different view of this now, is your own recovery personally, because you brought that up like a sentence ago when you said, I didn't spot red flags, now I'm getting better at it. Mm-hmm. So in your own recovery, you probably personally have feelings of restless, irritable, discontentness, or whatever popping up from time to time. We all do. Life happens.
Yeah.
So how do you spot your own red flags and deal with them?
Right. And that for me is the most important part, right? Because my recovery is about me and my behavior and my patterns and how I respond to life. So when I would start slipping in my program is when I would notice myself getting so focused on his drinking. And if he would just get sober and get his crap together and then my life, of course, things would be so much easier. And, going like rummaging through his car and finding empty bottles and then presenting him with the evidence because shaming somebody works. No, you cannot shame anybody into recovery.
Yeah, well, ain't that the truth?
Yourself included. So that's how we would notice. And I don't know if for me it was resentment, and I was filled with resentment and, frustration. And that's anytime I'm too focused on anybody else's stuff and taking their inventory, that's when I know I'm slipping in my program. So my sweet sponsor would say, stay in your hula hoop. Some people say like stay in your lane. So keeping my hands off other people's recovery, and then even outside of recovery, when I start to feel like I'm becoming an expert on someone else's life, or, a little too focused on, how I think, well, if they would just get some therapy, or I see them too enmeshed in their relationship, or like when I start doing that, I'm taking the focus off myself. And
taking somebody else's inventory.
Exactly, instead of my own. And you mentioned earlier, even when things are going well, we can feel this way. Like early on in recovery, I thought I only needed meetings when things were going bad. Things were going pretty bad. Nobody comes in on a high roll. But I need recovery even when things are going well. Mm-hmm. Like I even when things are going well, it's not just like, oh, I'm feeling crappy and full of resentment and, anxious and fearful. I need recovery. Like I need it even when things are going well.
Well, don't we go to recovery to share our experience, strength, and hope and help other people?
Yes.
Because, we want to help others. So when we're feeling strong and things are good,
exactly,
it's a great time to go and share your experience, strength, and hope. But also when you listen to other people's problems and then those problems start to pop up in your own life, it helps you to develop a red flag that may not have been there. Like there was a place for a red flag to pop up, but you never noticed it before. We've talked about patterns before and behavioral patterns. So I know my red flags a lot better by listening to other people and saying, oh, if that bristles me up, I get it. It was something that happened in my own life or whatever.
Right. Yeah, and that's true because, early on I remember, hearing about like the miracles of recovery. And there was like, at that point I was dubious. I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, how could it ever get any better? But that is important. We need to show up for those newcomers who are in the midst of like anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed, hopeless, because we need to be the message of hope for others too. So that's why it's important to show up even when things are going well, so we can be a testament, so we can share our experience, strength, and hope. And then also to hear that perspective of the person who is struggling and like, that was me once too. That could be me again. So wherever we're at in our recovery journey, it's important to keep at it.
Agreed, 100%. I have to remember that I suffer from a dis-ease, a disease that will try to kill me mentally, physically, spiritually, etc. And when I start feeling that dis-ease, restless, irritable, discontent, I have to look at what's going on in my life and know that I need to take something out of the bank where I've made deposits, so to speak.
Yeah.
And that's what, participating in a program of recovery, whatever you so choose, whether it's a 12-step program or, there's so many different programs out there, different types of recovery programs, whatever works for you.
Yes.
All pathways to recovery are good ones. And I believe we're so supportive of all of them. But in a 12-step program, I am supposed to keep away from drinking 100%, or it'll kill me, and that's why I've got to see the red flags. I've got to spot them.
Yes.
So I started doing this little, study here on the red flags, and depression and anxiety keep rearing their ugly head, so to speak.
Yeah.
But depression and anxiety are red flags that fit right in with restless, irritable, and discontent. If people start feeling apathetic about a goal or a future, I don't know about you, but I've been there.
Yeah.
Like I really want to do this thing. I have a goal to do this thing, but I have absolutely zero motivation to do this thing. Something's wrong. I might be falling into a little bit of a depression.
Right.
Things that normally get me excited and happy and feeling productive, I don't find the excitement anymore. I don't find the will to do it. You know, and also part of anxiety is inability to focus, which I sometimes mix up with my ADHD that I have. I definitely have undiagnosed ADHD, and I've studied the symptoms for those. And, matter of fact, Jillian, we probably will cover that as a topic in one of our future podcasts.
That's something we share.
So, by the way, what were we talking about?
I can't remember. I was looking at something sparkly.
Ooh, squirrel. But also the inability to focus can be a sign of anxiety.
Yes.
And that feeling of worry that pops up for no reason, like everything's going well.
Right.
Just feel agitated.
When things are going well. Well, and this is, we talked about this recently too, and, we just had that plug for a previous podcast on fear, and then, there's one on anxiety as well that we've done. When we keep ourselves, so I'm a recovering volunteeraholic, or being addicted to busyness, and that's a great way to not just sit with yourself. Because if you're always occupied, either with whether it's volunteering or taking other people's inventory or just not having the time to physically and mentally sit still, that's when that anxiety can creep in. Because if your brain is constantly occupied by other things, there's no room for that to set in. But it's in those quiet moments when there's nobody around and we have time for ourselves that those, we can manufacture some anxiety that our brains, at least for me, will be like, hey, what if we maybe let's have a panic attack?
Yeah, a panic attack sounds like a great idea. I've had those. I used to suffer from panic attacks. Mm-hmm. They're not pleasant at all. As a matter of fact, I had one so bad it sent me to the emergency room one time.
Yes, yep. I've had friends that have been there as well.
Yeah, that alone time, it took me a while to be comfortable in recovery alone. Mm-hmm. I used to hang out at the coffee shop all the time. In early recovery, I couldn't work. I wasn't able to function very well. So I hung out at the coffee shop. I used to talk to people in recovery from morning till night. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we'd even be at, one of the late night restaurants or something like that until 2, 3 in the morning until we'd go home, go to sleep, and then do it all over again. Yep. Because I couldn't sit still and I couldn't be alone. I always had to be talking to somebody. I had to, have that connection with somebody. And now, first of all, I'm not shy about my spirituality. So I commune with God, and that's part of my aloneness is prayer, and being able to spend time talking to this higher power out there. But I didn't start off that way. I was busy. Yeah. I don't know if I was a volunteeraholic like that, but I always had to be doing something. Yeah. So how did you get over that or cope with that so you could be alone and be happy about it and not lonely?
Right. Well, first of all, I recognized it was an issue.
Right.
And awareness is the first step. And I remember my dad even, probably in my 30s, he's like, sometimes I wonder if you don't stay so busy so you don't have to, paraphrasing, but basically, sit with yourself. Because of, I have a long history of dating men who are emotionally volatile and dysfunctional, and because it was made my dysfunction less obvious, but boy, it gave me something to focus on and to not have to deal with myself. But yeah, once I had that awareness, I'm like, oh boy. And then I got into recovery. That's been a tremendous leap forward in my ability to actually enjoy solitude and enjoy alone time, and sitting with the discomfort, because I've learned that if you allow those uncomfortable feelings to come, they pass more quickly. If you try to, at least for me, when I tried to repress or block or not feel things, and there were a lot of really uncomfortable feelings early in recovery, and I just didn't want to feel them. But it just, what now can be more like a little ripple used to be like a tidal wave. Mm-hmm. You can't outrun it. Like, it's going to be there. So just brace yourself, feel it, and it will pass. Like, it really does pass. So yeah, I get that's how recovery's really allowed me to recognize my being addicted to busyness, to pare things down, to really simplify life. To look where I'm at now compared to 10, 15 years ago, like I've swung so far the other way. I've gotten really comfortable with things being peaceful. That was really uncomfortable at first because I was so used to chaos in childhood and then in the relationships that I chose. So getting for peace and serenity to become my new normal, that took a few years. Yeah. Some of the other, when we were talking about red flags, because you mentioned, the restless, irritable, discontent, apathy, withdrawal is something that can happen when we're isolating ourselves from others is a red flag in recovery. I did that when I was trying really hard to get the alcoholic sober, but he didn't want to get sober yet. And I thought that by creating an alcohol-free environment, that would be welcoming for him, that he would just decide like, hey, I'm going to do this sober life thing. Like, he wasn't ready yet. And I realized that I think I started to withdraw because I think I felt some shame, or, like my friends were probably frustrated that I was still trying to make this relationship work. So I just didn't want to tell people that I was still hanging out with him or trying to encourage him to get sober. So I think I started to withdraw. Resentment, I mentioned, is a huge red flag, huge for me in recovery, whether I'm dealing with somebody who's active in addiction or not, or just people. Like, if I'm feeling resentment, and that's also a good indicator that I might need to set a boundary, but resentment is a big red flag. And then also being a victim. I've worked very, very hard since I started recovery to overcome that martyrdom. All those guys that I tried to rescue and fix, and they just they were so ungrateful.
You weren't able to fix them?
No, amazingly, my zero people is how many people I've rescued thus far.
But you kept trying for a long time.
Kept trying. Boy, yes, I did. And so now I have finally let go of that, and it's just, the only person I can really work on is me. And I knew that for so long, but yet I still kept trying to. I'm like, I see this potential of who this person could be if they would just get sober, fill in the blank. But that's not a very loving way. I mean, I didn't recognize that then. I'm like, how about just accepting people as they are? Loving them right where they're at. And sometimes that means
I really love you, but I want to change this, that, this, and that, and I want to change this, and could you be a little different with that? Maybe not do this, but I really love you.
Yeah, but I really love you. Like, how would I feel if somebody was, trying to treat me like a project? So I've just, sometimes we just have to accept that, people are who they are. We can either accept them as they are, or maybe that relationship's not a good fit for us. But if I'm trying to micromanage somebody else's life, my recovery has gone off the rails.
So that's a big red flag for you. See, with me, it tends to come back to the substance use thing. Because I don't want to drink, and to drink for me would be to die.
Right.
And I'm not suicidal today, today. So I have to see the red flags, or else I'm going to end up drinking.
Right.
At some point, to kill the pain, I'm going to end up going back to familiar turf from the past.
Yes.
So I have to be aware of all of these things. The three main categories. The restless, irritable, and discontent, but all the subcategories, like the anxiety, the depression that we're prone to, the sudden mood swings. Isolation, as you brought up, is really something else that sneaks up on you. You find people that they're going to support groups, and all of a sudden they stop coming.
Yep.
Or they cut back, and now they're down to, maybe once in a while kind of thing.
And if you're codependent like me, you might feel tempted to check in on them, because why aren't you coming to meetings?
Right. You're going to check in on people and all that. If I find myself like I don't want to leave the house, that might be a signal.
Yes.
Being able to spot these as early as possible has kept it from getting really bad. Or if it does get bad, like I've fallen into seasonal depression when we have, Michigan gray skies for 6 months, and it's cold and winds blowing sideways. And it's easy a lot less sunlight. It's easy to get seasonally depressed, and a lot of people suffer from seasonal depression.
Yes.
But I'm getting better at spotting it earlier. It used to be that I was already drowning from falling down the well, and before I'd even notice. Like, oh, by the way, I'm choking on water. I guess I'm drowning. As opposed to I've fallen out of the boat. There's a possibility that drowning could occur.
Right.
Spotting it early.
Yes. Yeah.
And my life jacket, to play that analogy all the way through, my life jacket is the gift of recovery to spot these things, so that I can keep afloat even when things are not good.
Right.
It's not uncommon to see people relapse when they're unable to de-stress or be able to get relief without using drugs or alcohol.
Mm-hmm. Or without using an alcoholic.
Or without using an
In my
alcoholic. So I guess in our last few minutes, let's just do a share each on what you do to build up your confidence to be able to be alone in your own head for a period of time. They say don't go up there without adult supervision.
Exactly.
But that's an old saying, don't stay up in your brain without adult supervision. But to be able to be alone without isolating, just to be able to be in solitude and be confident that, you're not going to do something stupid, I guess, to put it bluntly. What do you do to help build your self-confidence, Jillian?
To help build my self-confidence. Gosh, I mean, so if I'm struggling, I usually the best thing to do is to check in with like a sponsor or somebody in recovery. But and I've gotten really comfortable with that alone time. But what I try to do is, and we talked about this, I think in our fear podcast, is just drawing on past experiences where things have gone okay, and just referring to that, to those past experiences, like, okay, when I was like early on in recovery and I was really struggling, what worked for me? And just kind of referring back to those. And I have, all these wonderful like daily readers or little resources. And, we know that nature therapy for both of us is huge. That's very calming and soothing and restorative for me to get out in nature.
Nature therapy is a splendid idea.
Yes.
If you're feeling restless, irritable, or discontent, consider spending a couple hours out in the fresh air.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How about for you? I mean, we know nature also works for you, but what do you do in those times when you're alone and feeling restless, irritable, and discontent?
Well, I often build my confidence by talking to other people and getting some feedback. I have a sponsor. I have some very close people in my recovery world, and they know me well enough that I can see if I'm off the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And the more reassurance I get that I am going on the right path, I can keep my confidence up that if I'm alone for a period of time, I am not going to be tempted to do anything foolish.
Right.
And that I am able to find productive ways to be alone in solitude without feeling lonely.
Right.
Now, we all get lonely at different periods in our life where we long for other people, whether it be a relationship, friendship, or family, or whatever. But I don't have to feel lonely like coming out of the gate.
Right.
Like when you're first in recovery, it might feel very lonely.
Mm-hmm.
Not solitude, loneliness.
Yes. Yeah.
But over time, that loneliness tends to go away, and I actually am kind of an extroverted introvert.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Kind of wacky, a little bit of both. I get a lot of energy from other people, and I like being around other people, but I also have to recharge alone sometimes, and I like peace and quiet and solitude to just recharge my batteries a bit.
Same. There's a concept called ambivert, so you can kind of vacillate between the two, and that's really relatable for me as well. So for both of us, it sounds like checking in with others. We are fortunate to both have sponsors. My sponsor would say to me, and it is really good to get that feedback from others because it's hard to see outside ourselves sometimes, but to get that affirmation like, wow, you've come a long way. And to like remind us that like, you got this. But my sponsor would say like, you catch yourself sooner, because I'm pretty good at telling on myself now, like, hey, I'm doing this codependent thing, or I have another program that focuses more on like romantic relationships. So I checked in with my sponsor yesterday. I'm like, I'm doing this thing, and I know this is my, addict brain talking. Even though it's not a substance, you can get addicted to anything, people, including dysfunctional relationships. Trust me. I'm a seasoned expert in that. But yeah, just hearing that, like, you catch yourself sooner, and then like telling on myself when I'm like, hey, I'm doing this thing, that helps to prevent me from like spiraling out of control.
Yes, exactly. That being able to tell on myself Being able to talk to somebody and letting them know that there's something going on, that's important. I've found getting that feedback.
Yes.
Because stuck in my own head, I could talk myself into a circle.
Absolutely.
So today I am grateful that I am able to spot red flags that occur during the process of recovery. It's important for me to keep my sanity because I joked about earlier, being stark raving sober.
Yeah.
I could be just a jerk, stone cold sober. I don't have to be drunk to be an idiot. I can really do it. I could do it sober, and if I'm feeling angry or anxious or whatever, there's help available, there's counseling available, there's people to talk to, there's programs of recovery, and if we work all of this together and get help, take a holistic approach to your recovery.
Yes.
Look at it from a 360-degree view, and get help where you need help. And I bet Jillian's going to put some cool resources in the show notes, as she always does.
But I could find a few.
I bet you can. So, Jillian, thanks for talking about this topic with me today, and for the benefit of our listeners. Thanks for tuning in, listeners.
Thank you. And thank you for listening, listeners.
Well, have a great one until next time.